the world of work is changing. We're losing jobs with automation and artificial intelligence. More and more jobs are being done by robots, and that will happen. And it won't just be manual jobs, it'll be the jobs of accountants and lawyers. And the question becomes then, how do people have meaningful work?
Почему бизнес выбирает коучинг?
Business chooses coaching for entirely the wrong reasons. It's a great fucking question.
Добрый вечер, дорогие друзья! Рада вас приветствовать на нашей передаче, которая называется «Разговор по душам» с Анжелой Ястреб. И сегодня я хочу вам представить нашего гостя. Знакомьтесь, Майлз Дауни, основатель лондонской школы коучинга, разработчик бизнес-коучинга и автор 3 книг, которые получили широкую популярность и широкую известность не только в Великобритании, но и далеко за ее пределами. У нас уже вышло 2-е на нашем пространстве, вышло 2-е издание этой книги, и сегодня мы хотим с Майлзом побеседовать о его восприятии коучинга и о том, как он для себя видит бизнес-коучинг, как он занимается им, как он с ним работает. Здравствуйте, Майлз! И я очень рада тому, что вы сегодня согласились присутствовать в нашей передаче. И мне хочется вас спросить, задать вам такой естественный вопрос. Как вы начали заниматься коучингом? Почему коучинг?
Right. I started coaching when I was very young. I was a good tennis player, quite a good tennis player. I was born in Ireland, so we don't have good tennis players in Ireland. As a student, I studied architecture. As a student in the summer, I taught tennis. And when I was qualified as an architect, I was still more interested in teaching tennis than in being an architect. And then one day I read a book called The Inner Game of Tennis, and it opened up a whole new world. And I then decided to study the inner game, and that became a career in coaching.
Как долго вы занимаетесь коучингом? Сколько лет уже вы посвящаете коучингу?
Wow. Let me answer this way. It's more than 30 years.
Что за это время вообще изменилось в мире с тех пор, как вы занимаетесь коучингом?
Oh, wow. This could be a long answer. The biggest thing that's changed is that we have tried to professionalize and standardize a human interaction, and that we've attended to the things that we can manage, like codes of practice and ethics, and not really looked very closely at what good coaching is. So in the early days, there was nobody else doing coaching. There were just a few people. So it was great fun to be at the leading edge of a new profession, to be learning as we were doing it. And the biggest thing was, in those days, our clients were typically the very top people in the business, in our clients. So we were dealing with the business issues that they were concerned with, and that made it exciting.
А как вы сами изменились за то время, пока занимаетесь коучингом? Какая перемена произошла у вас?
In the early days, I was very young. I was in my late 20s. I was probably out of my depth in many situations. Fortunately, I learned fast. So I would say I didn't express my full personality. I held back. I wore blue business suits and tried to fit in. And as I've learned my trade, learned my craft, I've also learned how to bring my personality, my energy, my intelligence, my intuition into the coaching so that it makes it more fun, more creative and more productive.
Хорошо. И если посмотреть на то, как действительно то, чем мы занимаемся, меняет нашу жизнь, что произошло с вами? Вот вы выбрали когда-то для себя занятие коучингом. Это, если метафорически взять, возможно, была какая-то развилка или какой-то выбор, который вы сделали. Что предопределил этот выбор, сделанный когда-то давно?
I'm not sure there was something critical or a critical moment. It feels more like a lifelong journey to learn how to express myself. And that starts with actually beginning to understand who you choose to be or who I have chosen to be, and then to gradually let that out in the world and see what chaos would follow. So no, it was a gradual process of having the courage to express myself.
Какие несколько вещей, с вашей точки зрения, есть в коучинге, ради которых стоит им заниматься, стоит это практиковать?
I think coaching means lots of things to lots of different people. So, and I can answer that question from a business perspective, which says that what coaching is about is having a different order of result. Somebody wins. I worked last year with the coaches to the English rugby team. It's a big deal. And the only reason they employed me was to help them be better coaches so that next year they'll win the 2019 Rugby World Cup. So at one level, business results. That can be great fun and very engaging. But I think more fundamentally, and why I am engaged in coaching is I look around at a world in which people are basically compliant. They do what they're told, be that in school, university, in their church, in their business life. And that seems terribly sad. So what we use the word worthy or deserving. I'm not sure that's exactly the right word, but the thing that makes coaching potentially profound is that it becomes an opportunity for people to find their own voice, to stand in their own authority, and ultimately to express themselves in the world.
Насколько, как вы думаете, это сейчас актуально для людей?
Wow, again, nice question. More relevant than ever. So always relevant and now more relevant than ever. The world of work is changing. We're losing jobs with automation and artificial intelligence. More and more jobs are being done by robots, and that will happen. And it won't just be manual jobs, it'll be the jobs of accountants and lawyers. And the question becomes then, how do people have meaningful work? And the kinds of work that are beginning to emerge require intelligence, creativity, people being more engaged in the workplace. So having people be themselves and be real and be expressed makes a difference in the world of work. I haven't said that very elegantly, but.
А как вы думаете, где больше всего люди нуждаются в коучинге? В личной жизни или в бизнесе? Где больше потенциал этого инструмента, этого метода?
We sometimes, separating personal from business is a difficult thing to do. And I work in the world of business, one, because it provides some boundaries. I'm not a psychologist or a psychotherapist, so I don't go into the deeply personal. So most of my work is in the world of business. I think that if you get involved in a startup, it's like a pressure cooker, it's like a laboratory in there, because the demands on you to perform are so high. you raise some money, and every day the money diminishes. You burn money. And that means that there's no room in a startup for people to be egotistical and self-centered. So, and that's for me is a good way of thinking about how people will need to be different in other kinds of businesses. No room for ego, no room for being precious. So coaching plays a part in that world in helping people be themselves, overcome those obstacles, lose their ego, engage, and that's at that very simplistic level. But as people lose jobs, there's a requirement to help them find new jobs and new skills. So the people who manage them need to be. The demand is for the human skills, the communication skills, the coaching skills, the leadership skills. All of those things become not just important, they become vital.
Правильно ли я понимаю, что с точки зрения Майлза с вашей точки зрения, правильно я слышу вас, правильно ли я понимаю вас, что с вашей точки зрения не нужно разделять лайф, бизнес, коучинг, что коучинг — это тот инструмент, который, когда начинает свое влияние или свою трансформацию над человеком, когда он вовлекает человека вот в эту внутреннюю трансформацию, он меняет его жизнь, неважно, чем человек занимается.
So first of all, you can't separate because that person is, who has a life is showing up in work. So at one level, you can't separate them. The coach, however, needs to, because, and the reason they need to is that very few coaches are trained, sufficiently trained in the world of psychology or psychotherapy. My fear is that we have people who've done 1 or 2 day workshops on coaching, who then go and do life coaching, and they don't understand the boundaries, they don't understand about how to help somebody be safe, feel safe, and contain. They don't understand the difference between a healthy coping adult and somebody who's in pain and suffering. So one of the reasons that I try and make a distinction for the coach is that they don't mess about in other people's lives. So for me, having that boundary means also that if I'm coaching somebody in the world of business, they're not paying, the organization's paying. They don't care if they're healthy coping adults. They just want them to deliver a business result, right? So one, it allows me to do that. But also, if I draw a line and say, I don't do life coaching, I just do business coaching. If I draw that line, I'm in charge. And if I need to open that door to help somebody explore who they are or what their sense of their purpose is in life or why they're afraid of success, then I can open the door consciously, cautiously. So I make the distinction, and it's a false distinction because it protects me, it protects them, and it protects the company that's paying the bill.
То есть, другими словами, можно сказать, что это разделение такой маркетинговый инструмент и некий инструмент для специализации коучей. Коучи, которые понимают хорошо или имеют образование, хорошо понимают психологию или имеют психологическое образование, они обычно идут в лайф-коучинг. Коучи, которые имеют опыт работы в бизнесе или опыт работы бизнес-консультантом, идут работать в бизнес-коучинг. То есть правильно ли я понимаю вас, что это нужно лишь для того, чтобы, собственно говоря, потребителям было проще определиться с выбором определенного коуча в зависимости от запроса, собственно говоря, который возникает у них?
Yes, and it's a bit more than simply marketing, although that's important. It actually is about, for me, it's more about protecting the people who we're coaching and making sure that people who aren't trained don't get into conversations and territory where they don't know what they're doing, because that's dangerous.
Хорошо. А какие тенденции сейчас, скажем так, в мире коучинга в Европе? Как развивается коучинг в Европе?
there are two big forces at play. They're not big in the in global terms in the scheme of things, but within the tiny world of coaching, there are two things that are at play. One of which is increasing oversight from bodies like ICF or EMCC, and that has an impact. And the other is that there are so many more providers of training. Then I throw in the third thing, which is particularly in the last 10 years, and particularly in the UK, the buyers of coaching, large corporations, have become much more strict and much more formal in their processes. What's gotten lost in all of that is that coaching is fundamentally a skill. And it's a skill that can be taught relatively easily. But we've tended to confuse it with different models and approaches. I'm an NLP person, I'm a this person, I do systemic something, and it's like, no. It's a very simple skill to enable another person to think clearly and make better decisions. And there isn't enough. So in all of the becoming formal, we've lost the attention on the skill. And I play tennis to quite a high level. I practice. And the only thing that made me a good coach was that I started teaching coaching when I was quite young. I probably had no right to, but I did. I have delivered more coaching when other people are watching than anybody in the world. Hours and hours and hours of demonstrating coaching at a conference, at a workshop, at a whatever. So I've had scrutiny and feedback that very few people on the planet have had. And to the degree that I'm any good at coaching, that's what's made me good. But I'm lucky. Most people don't get to practice their coaching.
Насколько популярен коучинг в Великобритании?
It's still, so in the corporate world, it is now an established feature. Most large corporates will have somebody who's responsible for the coaching activities, for looking after a bench, a group of coaches who provide regularly their services to the company. So it's within the corporate world and the bigger organizations, it's there and it's there to stay. But if you go outside the corporate world and people in small businesses, they don't know what you're talking about still.
А как вы думаете, может быть, вы даже знаете, не думаете, сколько коучей вообще в Великобритании?
So in terms of the providers of coaching, there are now many, and I can think of about 4 that I rate as having a real understanding of what they're doing. One of them has quite a psychological background to it, and the upside of that, it means that its practitioners are safe practitioners, but the market is completely swamped. There are more providers of coaching. In fact, I think the people who are making most money out of coaching is not the coaches. I think the average income for a coach in the UK is about £40,000 a year. Mm-hmm. The people who are making money from coaching are the people who are training the coaches and providing them with services.
Почему бизнес выбирает коучинг? Какая ценность в коучинге есть для бизнеса?
Business chooses coaching for entirely the wrong reasons. When I started working in coaching, and this is still true of the clients that I work with, I got involved with those projects, those engagements, in order to deliver a business result. Coaching has moved away from being about business results, and it's now entirely in the domain of learning and development. And that's unfortunate. It has a role to play in learning and development, undoubtedly, but we've lost the potency. When the England rugby people ask me to work with them, they didn't ask me to work with them in order that their coaches should be better people, should develop as people. They asked me to work with them because next year they want to win the World Cup. And coaching has a massive impact to have. I think we almost need to reinvent coaching so it's focused on business, not on HR, learning and development.
И тогда, если посмотреть вот на ту популярность, которую коучинг имеет в бизнес-среде в Великобритании, здесь возникает такой естественный вопрос. А сколько, как вам кажется, процентов бизнеса в Великобритании действительно используют этот метод, используют этот инструмент в реальных своих процессах управленческих?
I can answer the question, but not with numbers and not specifically, because that's not an area that I'm familiar with. What I do know is any large corporate, a Fortune 500 company, anybody listed on the London Stock Exchange, they will have people in their business, either within the business who are trained as coaches, or they will have people on a coaching bench, a team of coaches who they know and they manage. So it's in large corporates, it's everybody, it's 100%.
То есть можно сказать, что коучинг в некотором смысле меняет устоявшиеся методы управления менеджмента, того менеджмента, которого мы знали раньше.
You can say that in some way. We've had so if we have external providers of coaching who are not employees, that's one thing. And then we have and there's more and more of this happening where the management and leadership population get trained in coaching skills. This is a good thing. Lots of coaching happens every day. Anytime a manager speaks to one of the people on their team about how to do a job, that's coaching. We just haven't called it that before, and we haven't unpicked it and understood what makes it good coaching. So I think that if you're in an organization and there are people for whom you're responsible, you've got three hats. One hat is about leadership, another hat is about management, and another hat is about coaching. The leadership conversation is about helping somebody see how their role, their job is meaningful, how it fits in the bigger picture. That's the leadership piece. The management hat is about making sure that the person who's working to me has clear goals, clear understanding about the standards that are expected, and is held to account to those goals. And then the third conversation is, so how are you going to achieve those goals? It's about the how. So I don't like people saying it's about managing in a coaching style, because coaching and managing are different. In the UK, we've been training people to do that for 20 years. And it goes in and out of fashion. But now what's happening is smaller organizations, particularly professionals like vets, veterinary surgeons who look after animals, lawyers, all these professions are now beginning to look at how they can improve their offering by being better at coaching.
А есть в бизнесе какие-то, не знаю, участки или какие-то моменты управленческие, где коучинг не будет работать?
It depends a little bit on how broad your definition of coaching is. If your definition of coaching is only about asking questions, then the answer is there are places where other things need to happen. I think that I grew up in Ireland. This was a country that was run by the church and a very conservative government for many, many years. And what occurs with that is you create a culture of compliance, people who do as they're told. So in most organizations, and I'm right up to the top of them, you have people who do not speak their mind, who do not say, who are incapable of giving feedback, who are incapable of looking another person directly in the eyes and saying something that other person needs to hear, that they disagree or that they've got a better idea or a different idea. So there's a whole there are a whole number of different communication skills that we simply don't deliver with any degree of skill right across the workforce. So I would say it's broader than just coaching. Coaching is very important, but also having clear leadership conversations, having conversations where I take a risk by telling somebody something they might not want to hear. We have architects designing buildings so that people will bump into each other, so they'll talk to each other. I mean, it's at one level it's great, but what's absurd is that we need to do that in the first place.
Действительно, управленческий коучинг требует пересмотра своего отношения к сотрудникам, требует от менеджеров пересмотреть свое отношение к сотрудникам. Как вам кажется, что именно здесь будет являться таким ключевым мотивом для менеджера менять свое отношение к сотруднику, если он хочет использовать коучинг как инструмент управления?
The starting place is to begin to create relationships where there's some trust. And on that basis, you can then begin to be more truthful, which comes down to the first place is to start listening to people, to actually hear what they're saying. We recently ran a program around feedback in Russia for a large corporate in Moscow. And when they looked at the way in which we were speaking about giving feedback, they said, no, we can't do that here. And when we asked, what do you do? The answer was, we shout. People are so afraid of doing something different. They're so, if you go to a corporate and they say, Miles, can you help us, can you train our managers in coaching skills? You say, yes. So, well, so you do good consulting and you ask why, and then you say, but we only want you to train this layer. So if you only train this layer, they do nothing. They do nothing because they're afraid of behaving differently with the layer down. Here's what's really interesting. If you train the layer down and the layer beyond that, they start looking at their managers and saying, we've been trained to coach. That's not what you're doing. You need to start coaching me. You cannot change these skills by simply training people. You've got to have the people who consume bad leadership. If we start training them, something begins to change because the more junior people start saying, you trained us all in coaching, why aren't you coaching us? You trained us all in giving feedback, nobody gives me feedback. So the early part of this conversation you were asking about, is there a need for these things? Yes, it's vital. You know, this world of disruption where things change overnight. Management, senior management can't be in charge all the time. It's just not possible. So something's got to change. That demands more flexibility, which in turn demands more coaching. And yet, we're stuck in 20th century styles of styles of non-communication, if I'm truthful.
А как вам кажется, чего никогда не будет?
Sorry, I'm just going to tear my hair out.
Как вы думаете, чего никогда не будет делать менеджер, который владеет навыками коучинга?
So if a person genuinely understands coaching and what lies behind it, the thing they'll never do is squash another human being. They'll never suppress another human being. They'll because they will be driven by a desire to see that other person thrive and flourish. So a lot of the very negative behaviors, shouting at people, telling people they're wrong, telling people to stop asking questions and just do as you're told, that's almost impossible for a trained coach because it suppresses the other person. Does that make sense?
Да, да. И здесь возникает такой интересный парадокс, что при всей простоте коучинга как метода и при достаточно понятной ясности коучинговых навыков и коучинговых компетенций очень мало менеджеров могут по-настоящему искренне разделить ту идею или тот смысл, который коучинг несет в мир? Как вам кажется, почему это происходит?
We have been so heavily trained to comply, to do as we're told, that, and it occurs in so many different ways. And one of the ways it occurs is that even if I know better as a manager, I won't necessarily do the right thing. I'll do what's expected of me. And if the culture of my organization is one of a slightly aggressive, suppressive, bullying style of management, that's probably what I'll do, because I don't have the courage to do something different. So I think there's another factor. People like power. People like being the manager and having other people do as they are told. I was watching a sporting event a few weeks ago, and there was a young woman helping people find their seats. And at certain points, it was a tennis match, when the players changed ends. Sometimes you can leave because there's enough time and leave your seat and go to do whatever you need to do. And then sometimes you can't. This young woman, if an older white man, properly dressed, broke the rules, she didn't say anything. Then I was watching this, and suddenly a child, 12-year-old boy, got up in the wrong time, and she was on him like a ton of bricks in a second. People like power over other people, and I don't understand it myself. I mean, I really don't. But so they like the power, and it's easier just to say to somebody, don't ask questions, just do as I tell you. Much easier. And it's horrid.
Да, еще есть один такой интересный парадокс. От многих людей, которые задействованы в бизнесе, я слышала такое мнение относительно того, что коучинг, они боятся, сотрудники, после того, как их руководителей подготовили и обучили владению коучинговыми инструментами и навыками, сотрудники говорят о том, что они стараются избегать таких коучинговых бесед, потому что усматривают в этом некую манипуляцию. Что вы думаете по этому поводу?
I know this is true in certain parts of Russia, from having done a lot of work I know we're in the Ukraine. My geography is limited, but I know where I am. I'm wondering if the same culture might pervade. Mm-hmm. That psychology was seen to be the instrument of the state, and was therefore kind of frowned upon. And I'm wondering, I don't know, but I'm wondering, is there a hangover from that part of the past?
Mm-hmm. Коучинг как метод предполагает открытый диалог двух людей, у которых, в некотором смысле, помыслы и намерения чисты. Но в бизнесе, бизнес, это инструмент, это машина для зарабатывания денег, для генерации прибыли или для масштабирования, для экспансии, для тех целей, которые преследуют акционеры. И здесь не всегда получается, что менеджер может быть человеком, который открыт к диалогу, и его намерения чисты. Как вы смотрите на вот этот парадокс?
And it's one of the reasons why coaching is difficult to bring into the culture and practices of an organization. And this is in part an answer to your previous question as well, is that we're not always very good at being transparent with other people. So you don't often hear somebody saying, my intent is this. And if they did, life would be much more simple. So if I'm about to give somebody feedback, or if I'm about to review somebody's work, I will almost always open up with, my intent is to support you. My intent is to help you make this a better piece of work. My intent is, in short, to be supportive. And once you start getting, one, you have to be clear about your, your intent in order to say that. One, you have to be clear about your intent in order to be able to say that. But two, you then have to start acting in alignment with what you said, because the people around you will see it if you don't. I think that one of the ways of having that change is an individual, and hopefully many individuals, being much clearer about what their intent is when they're speaking to another person. And it's a really difficult thing to do. I mean, you take that out of the world of business and into one's personal life, and you're speaking with your children or your spouse or your whoever. If you remembered what your intent was in that moment, lots of arguments would be saved.
Хорошо. В коучинге очень... В коучинге многое строится на отношениях. И прогресс в коучинге обеспечивается прежде всего отношениями, которые возникают между коучем и коучи или непосредственным руководителем и сотрудником. Но многие люди боятся отношений. Ваше мнение, что так в отношениях пугает людей?
It's a great fucking question. I assume we're editing this. It's a great question, and I've almost got an answer. People are afraid of not so much relationship, but they're afraid of being vulnerable. They're afraid of exposing themselves, of opening themselves up. Either because they'll be seen to be wanting or missing or not complete, or because there may be something in there that they're afraid of showing to the world. So it's, if I create a relationship with somebody, it immediately gives them license to inquire of me and to get into a different order of conversation about who I am, and they may even tell me some truths. So by not having a relationship, what I do in that moment is I stop any inquiry about me, so I get to protect myself. And I suspect that's probably a lot of what's going on. We know people are afraid of change. We know that almost the biggest kind of stress we can put on the brain is change. So this system is designed to avoid change at all cost, almost. So by being open to another person, that is a window to change. So boy, I'm going to close that window.
Для меня в некотором смысле коучинг — это про быть самим собой, и это же в то же время про уязвимость. Мне кажется, что люди очень боятся того, чтобы быть уязвимыми. Они не видят силу в своей уязвимости. Как вы ведете себя в реальном коучинге, который вы проводите, который вы практикуете в бизнесе, когда вы сталкиваетесь с тем, что человек очень сильно скрывает свою уязвимость, он хочет казаться сильнее и могущественнее, чем он есть? Как вы ведете себя как коуч?
This refers to an earlier part of our conversation. First of all, you have to help them become aware of their behavior. And you can raise the temperature a little bit by asking them, are they aware of the consequences for them and for others of the behavior? And this would almost certainly be an area in which I would then refer them to somebody else. So as a coach, I wouldn't feel competent to help that person turn that round. There are just too many things that I don't know about psychology and how people are wired up, and I don't have the skills or capabilities to help them change it. What I'm very good at is about helping somebody see it, acknowledge the cost, and then find a route forward, usually by speaking with somebody who is qualified to talk to them. And all I can think of is how painful that must be for them. So,
как вы считаете, какой опыт, какие знания, навыки и какие компетенции нужны человеку для того, чтобы стать успешным бизнес-коучем?
My answer to this question has changed since I started out, because in my early days I took a very purist approach to coaching, which said that if you had the skills and could ask the questions, then you didn't need to have knowledge of their business or their their business, how it works, and all of those things. And I think there's some truth in that, but what I'm noticing is in the more recent years that where I've specialized in only one or two different kinds of businesses, that I'm much more effective because I understand professional service firms incredibly well. I know what's important. I know how you get ahead. I know how you get attention. I know the values of those kinds of businesses. So I can be really supportive of people in professional service firms. Put me into a manufacturing environment, and I would be still, I would like to think, quite useful. So I think it's important to develop a niche knowledge, to have some area of the business world, either an industry or how people transition in and out, some area of it that you know very well. And I think that there's merit in that from the coaching perspective, for the coach's perspective, in that it's easier to market yourself, it's easier to sell yourself, and it's easier to get great results. All those things help. And I think if I was buying coaching for me or for a colleague, I would increasingly be interested in that person having knowledge of my business, prior knowledge of my kind of business. I think also you have to have so that helps hugely. I think my first engagement at the age of 28 was with the world's leading strategic management consultancy. I was an architect and a tennis player. I was out of my depth. This consultancy were brilliant. They gave me about a 4-day induction into their business. And what I learned was some of the key things about how to be a consultant. And they to this day, 30-something years later, are still a client of mine. And I learned by association with them that there are a set of skills around consulting. How do I make an inquiry about what's going on in that organization? How do I understand what's happening in that organization? What are the power plays? What are the bits that are moving? And that means that I can help the person I'm coaching be successful more quickly. So when I didn't understand about business, my consulting skills helped me out. So I think you've got to be a good coach. You've got to understand the craft. You've got to be able to consult. If I can consult, I deliver a result for the person I'm coaching and for the organization paying the bill. And the thing I've added into that in the last probably 6 or 7 years is I'm going to specialize in 1 or 2 kinds of businesses, because then I can make even more value for those people.
Знакомы ли случаи вам, когда люди с управляющих позиций, управленческих позиций уходили в коучинг, становились коучами? Как часто в вашем опыте менеджеры, бывшие менеджеры становятся коучами?
There are a few. And there are a few who do a very good job. The problem usually is that they don't have a sufficient distinction between being a mentor and a coach, or they have the sense of wanting to give something back. I learned a lot, I gained a lot from my career, and now I want to give something back. And whereas that can be, there's good in that, there's also something dangerous in it. So often these are older white males who have a slightly patronizing attitude, and they're not great listeners, and they're in the business of giving advice. And advice, you can give advice as a coach, but you've got to be able to do a bit more than that. So I've seen a small number who've transitioned successfully, and what they've always done is they've found the best place to retrain, and they've invested in their retraining. So they've learned the new skills. Where it goes wrong is where I've been in business for years. I'm good with people. It's like, and they just dump their stuff on other people, and they go, "Oh, thanks, boss." Like, so and there's too much of that going on. But if somebody understands it, I imagine that for somebody who's kind of moving into semi-retirement, it's a wonderful way of engaging usefully in the world and making some money at the same time.
А известно ли вам, чем бизнес-коучинг, который представлен и практикуется в Америке, отличается от того бизнес-коучинга, который представлен и практикуется в Европе? Есть ли какие-то отличия?
Last I looked, there are most of the coaching work that happens in the US is much more about life coaching than business coaching. A lot of what is called business coaching in the US is about giving people advice. So one organization comes to mind in which there are specific sessions that are designed. In the first session, you do this, handle your finances better, or whatever it is. And it's a one-on-one training program. So you don't find you find less of what I would call coaching and less of what happens in the UK in terms of business coaching than in the States. So you do find in the UK in particular, people who understand what it is to coach, who are good consultants, and who have knowledge of business. And those are the people who really make a difference. A lot of people I bump into who call themselves coaches in the States are peddling some philosophy. There's some philosophy that's driving what they're doing. And there's a whole bunch of coaches that came out of Erhardt's seminar training, EST, which became the Forum, which became Landmark. And that's just a way of looking at the world. And it's not coaching.
Если посмотреть, я интересовалась ситуацией, если посмотреть на карту, то мы увидим, что в Америке есть коучинг и бизнес, и лайф-коучинг представлен в Великобритании, в странах постсоветского пространства, а вот эта центральная Европа, она практически коучингом не представлена, ни лайф, ни бизнес, и его там практически нет. Чем это можно объяснить, как вы думаете?
So coaching is a kind of an Anglophone thing. It grew up in America and England, English speaking, and was nurtured there and became something there. So even the European Mentoring and Coaching Council, EMCC, yes, that's essentially a UK-based organization that has stretched out into Europe. There's quite a deal of in France and in Germany, much less coaching happening. A little bit in Spain. There's one or two. There's probably more in Spain than there is in France.
Там нет сильных школ. Нет сильных школ.
Yeah. I think it's because it is seen to be an English-spoken thing and not a French or a German thing, that it's been rejected not rejected, but it's been more difficult in France and in Germany. So I think that's been a big part of the problem. Germany is way behind in this, way behind.
Okay. Спасибо большое, было очень интересно.